Welcome, friends. I'm back with another fantastic story. In this episode, we'll delve into the story of Jack and Adeline. Sit back and buckle up. Our journey is about to begin. I thought I had married an ordinary alien woman, but it turns out she was the Empress of a galaxy. Kestrel's Rest was the kind of world where the customs officer also poured the drinks, mostly because he was the only man sober enough to do both, and where nobody's paperwork was ever quite in order because the wind kept blowing the forms off the desk and into the mud. Jack liked it there. He had washed up on that dust-colored border rock the way tired men do, without a plan and with 2 bags, one of which was empty, and he had stayed because staying required less effort than leaving. He met Adeline at the market, arguing with old Toma over the price of onions, and winning so thoroughly that Toma threw in the garlic for free just to make her stop. She had skin like soft blue twilight, and the delicate points to her ears, elf fine, half hidden under her hair, and she carried herself like someone who had firmly decided not to be found. Jack, who had never once in his life read a room correctly, walked up and told her the onions were overpriced because they'd been grown on a moon with sad soil. She looked at him for a long, dangerous second. Then she laughed. It was not a polite laugh. It was the real thing, surprised out of her, and Jack decided on the spot that he would spend a great deal of energy earning it again. They married 11 months later under a sky with 2 small sons in a ceremony attended by Toma, a mechanic named Ellie, and a goat that belonged to no one. Adeline cooked like she was diffusing ordnance, precise, ferocious, unwilling to negotiate with a simmering pot. Jack fixed the leaking roof so badly that it leaked in a new and more creative location, and she praised the repair with a straight face that he loved her for. She never spoke of where she came from. Jack, who had built his own life out of the wreckage of a past he didn't discuss, understood a locked door when he saw one, and had the decency not to knock. Still, he noticed things, because he was foolish but not blind. He noticed how she went very still when an official transport hummed overhead. He noticed the star chart she studied by lamplight and folded away when he entered. He noticed the ring in the drawer, a thin band of some metal that caught light it hadn't been given, far too fine for a wanderer who haggled over vegetables. "You're a woman of mystery," he told her once, drying a plate. "And you're a man of dishes," she said. "So we each have our burdens." The sky broke on an ordinary Tuesday. It happened at noon and turned noon into midnight. Warships, more of them than a nothing world could ever warrant, stacked in impossible formation, their hulls swallowing both suns until the house went dark and the lamps guttered on by themselves. Jack's first thought was that the war had finally reached even here. His second thought was for Adeline, and he turned to find her already standing, already changed. She set down her cup with a hand that did not shake, and the softness he had married drained out of her face like water from a cracked glass, and what remained underneath was old and certain, and frankly, a little terrifying. "Stay inside," she said. "Not really my strong suit," said Jack, and followed her out the door in his socks. The ships did not fire. They descended, and from them poured soldiers in silver, and the soldiers did not raise their weapons. They knelt, 100 throats, then 1,000, spoke a single name into the burning air, and it was not the name he knew from the marriage papers, or it was, but wearing a crown. Empress Adeline, sovereign of the sapphire throne, lost to us 3 years, and found. Jack stood in his own doorway in his socks while the woman who had beaten a farmer over onions was addressed as the ruler of 100 worlds he had never heard of. She turned back to look at him. Her blue skin was luminous against the fire in the sky, and in her eyes he saw the whole apology she had never once been able to say aloud, every truth she had swallowed to keep this small, borrowed, ordinary life with him. "So," Jack managed. His voice came out steadier than he felt. "The onions. Was that a hobby, or were you keeping in practice?" Something broke and mended in her expression at the same time. "I ran from all of this," she said quietly, walking back to him while 10,000 soldiers held their bowed heads. "A throne is a beautiful cage, Jack. You were the first door I ever found that opened outward." She touched his face. "I didn't lie to deceive you. I lied to survive being wanted by everyone but the one person I chose. He should have been furious, and part of him was. But he had been a man pretending to be no one, and he knew exactly what it cost to fold yourself small enough to slip through a crack in your own life. "Come back with me," she said. Not a command. A question. Perhaps her first true one. "As yourself. I'm done hiding. Both of us." Jack looked at the fleet, at the kneeling galaxy, at the enormous frightening size of the woman he had married in front of a goat. Then he looked at her. Only her. "Fine," he sighed. "But I want a title too. I'm not carrying an Empress's luggage on a commoner's salary." And Adeline, sovereign of the sapphire throne, laughed, the real one, surprised out of her, exactly as she had on the first day, and took the hand of an ordinary man and led him up into the sky. The ship was called the Meridian Ascendant, which Jack thought was a great deal of name for a vessel, and its corridors were carved from a pale stone that glowed faintly from within, as if someone had convinced moonlight to hold still and be architecture. He walked them in his socks, having refused 3 separate offers of ceremonial boots, and discovered that an empire is very good at many things, but has no idea what to do with a man who won't stop asking where the kitchen is. "There is no kitchen," said the attendant assigned to him, a nervous young officer named Cora, whose ears were pointed sharper than Adeline's. "Your meals are synthesized, Consort Jack." Synthesized. Jack tested the word like a suspicious onion. "So a machine dreams up my dinner." "A very sophisticated machine." That's what worries me. Sophisticated things have opinions. He was, it turned out, the first human ever to set foot on an Imperial dreadnought, a fact that made the crew regard him roughly the way one regards a dog that has wandered into a cathedral, with alarm, reverence, and a lively concern for the furniture. They bowed when he passed. They also quietly counted the silverware, which he respected. Adeline changed on the ship, and he watched it happen with a low ache. On Kestrel's Rest, she had worn the smell of wood smoke and stubbornness. Here she wore the sapphire throne like a second skin, and courtiers flowed around her in currents Jack couldn't read, all of them speaking a clipped court tongue that the ship translated into his ear a half-second late, so that everyone seemed to be finishing thoughts he hadn't heard them begin. She stood taller. She smiled less. She was magnificent, and she was farther away than the border world had ever been. He found her that first night on an observation deck, staring at a nebula that turned slowly like dye in water, blue folding into gold. "You've gone all Imperial," he said, coming to stand beside her. "It's very intimidating. 10 out of 10. Would kneel." "Don't," she said. But the corner of her mouth betrayed her. "You're the one person on this ship who won't. I'd like to keep it that way." "Good, because my knees are terrible. Border world cartilage." He looked at the nebula. "That's genuinely beautiful. What is it?" "A dying star. It's been dying for 4,000 years. She was quiet a moment. "My people came here to watch it. There's a superstition that if you name the thing you fear while looking at a slow death, it loses its hold on you." "Romantic," Jack said. "Bit grim. What do you fear?" She didn't answer right away. On the far side of the glass, a fleet tender drifted past, tiny against the ruined star, running lights blinking in a language of their own. "That I've brought you into a life that will use you," she said finally. "There are people at court, Jack, who will smile at you and measure you for a coffin in the same breath. A consort with no blood claim, no army, no title but the one I invented on a doorstep. You are, to them, a beautiful weakness. A door into me." Her jaw tightened. "I spent 3 years learning to have no soft places, and then I married one and flew him into the throne room." Jack considered this with the seriousness it deserved, which was to say, he thought about it for exactly as long as it took to find the joke, because the joke was how he thought. "So what you're telling me," he said, "is that I'm a strategic vulnerability." "Yes. A national security risk. Essentially." "Adeline." He put a hand to his chest, deeply moved. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever called me. And there it was. The real laugh. Surprised out of her, ricocheting off the glass and the dying star and 4,000 years of superstition. She pressed a hand to her mouth as if to catch it before the court could see, and failed. And for a moment she was just the woman who had overpaid for garlic and pretended his roof was fixed. "I'm serious," she said, still laughing. "I know you are. That's why I'm not." He took her hand, the one wearing the ring that caught unearned light. The ring he now understood was a signet older than most stars. "Listen, I don't know anything about your court. I'll use the wrong fork, insult the wrong duke, probably start an intergalactic incident by asking a general where the bathroom is. But I know you. I knew you before the kneeling. Whatever they've got planned, they have to get through a man who genuinely does not care how important they think they are." Her laughter faded into something steadier and warmer. "That," she murmured, "may actually be the most dangerous thing about you. See? Strategic asset. I want that in writing." The dying star turned. Somewhere below them, a galaxy waited, sharpening its smiles. And Jack, consort to an Empress, national security risk, holder of terrible knees, decided he had never in his life been so gloriously out of his depth, and found, to his own surprise, that he did not fear it at all. The sapphire throne did not sit on a planet, which surprised Jack, who had assumed thrones came with weather. Instead, it floated. An entire crystalline city strung between 3 moons like a jewel caught in a spider's web, its towers grown rather than built, glimmering with the same unearned light as Adeline's ring. When the Meridian Ascendant slid into dock, 10,000 banners unfurled from the spires, and a choir of some 500 voices began to sing, and Jack leaned toward Cora and whispered, "Is this for us? Or does the city do this every time someone parks?" "For you, Consort Jack," said Cora, mortified. "Tell them they shouldn't have, really, especially the singing. My mother sang. It's why I left home." He was given rooms the size of small nations, a wardrobe that could have clothed a legion, and a personal steward, an ancient silver-eared man named Theodore, who had served 3 empresses and regarded Jack with the patient dread of a scholar assigned to catalog a natural disaster. Theodore's first act was to lay out a court garment of such staggering complexity that Jack held it up, turned it around twice, and asked with genuine feeling, "Which end is the neck?" "The collar denotes rank, consort," said Theodore. "This one indicates that you outrank everyone in the room save her radiance." "And this bit?" Jack pointed at a jeweled clasp. "That indicates you are married." "Convenient. Saves conversation." He set it down. "Theodore, level with me. How many of the people I'm about to meet want me dead?" The old steward considered the question with the care it deserved. "Dead is strong, consort. I would say most of them want you gone. Dead is merely the tidiest available method. I like you, Theodore. You don't sugarcoat. It's refreshing after a lifetime of being lied to by nicer people." The court assembled in a hall where the floor was transparent and showed the drop straight through to the moons below, a design Jack understood immediately to be psychological warfare against anyone with a fear of heights, which he discovered while walking across nothing, included him. He kept his face pleasant. He had learned, on a border world, that the trick to walking on something terrifying is to look like you've done it 1,000 times and found it boring. The nobles were beautiful the way knives are beautiful. They bowed to Adeline, her radiance, resplendent now in a gown that seemed woven from the nebula itself, and they bowed a precise, insulting half-inch less to Jack, and one of them, a lean man with the sharpest ears in the room and a smile like a paper cut, stepped forward. "Consort Jack," said the man. "I am Adrian, warden of the outer reaches. We are all so fascinated to meet the man who tamed our runaway Empress." The hall stilled. Jack felt Adeline go rigid beside him. Tamed was a loaded word, deliberately dropped, a hand testing a locked door. Jack smiled. "Tamed? Oh no, you've got it backwards." He let the pause stretch, the way you do before the punchline. "I haggle over onions for a living. She married down, Warden, and everyone in this room knows it, which is why you're all still standing here counting the silverware instead of running things yourselves. A ripple went through the court, half scandal, half suppressed delight. So let's not do the thing where you flatter me to find the soft spot. I don't have one. I already gave up everything I own to marry a woman who fixes soup like it owes her money. There's nothing left in me to threaten. Adrian's smile did not move, but something behind his eyes recalculated. How refreshing, he said. A consort with no ambitions. None whatsoever. Terrible knees, too. Ask anyone. Adeline turned to him, and beneath the imperial mask he caught it, the flash of the real woman, delighted and alarmed in equal measure, watching her national security risk detonate himself harmlessly in the middle of her most dangerous room. Later, when the court had dispersed into its currents of whispered venom, she pulled him into an alcove where the crystal walls dampened sound. You just made an enemy of the most dangerous man at court, she said. I made an enemy of him the second I stepped off the ship married to you. At least now it's out in the open. I prefer my knives where I can see them. He glanced through the transparent floor at the moons turning below. Also, I think I insulted a duke. The one with the hat like a startled bird. That's a war hero. He should be more startled by that hat then. He looked at her, and the humor softened. Adeline, what did Adrian mean, runaway Empress? What exactly did you run from 3 years ago? Because a woman doesn't leave all this over bad soup. And for the first time since the sky had broken over their little house, Adeline's certainty faltered, and Jack understood with the slow, cold turn of a dying star that the door he'd never knocked on had a great deal more than a crown behind it. She told him in the observatory, because some truths need a whole sky to hold them. It was a chamber at the highest point of the crystal city, a dome of that same living glass, and when Adeline touched the wall, it went clear as air, so that they stood suspended among the actual stars with nothing between them and the dark but a held breath. Jack, who had made his peace with transparent floors through sheer bloody-mindedness, found that a transparent everything was a fresh negotiation, and he sat down rather firmly. I'm going to talk, he announced, from the floor. The floor and I have an understanding. Adeline sat beside him, folding herself down out of the Empress and back toward the woman, and for a while she said nothing. Then, the throne isn't inherited, Jack. Not the way you'd think. It isn't blood. She turned her signet ring slowly. It's chosen. There's a thing in the heart of this city. We call it the loom. Older than my people. Older than the language for it. It reaches into a candidate's mind, and it reads them. All the way down, every cruelty and cowardice and buried thing, and it decides whether they can carry the weight of 100 worlds without dropping them. When it chose me, I was 19. That sounds, Jack said carefully, like a deeply invasive job interview. It's the most alone a person can be, she said. It knows you better than you know yourself, and then it hands you power, and then it watches. Every empress is bonded to the loom for life. It's how the throne has held for 9,000 years without a tyrant. The machine won't let one sit. Jack looked at the stars, which did not blink. So you're saying there's an ancient mind-reading appliance running the galaxy, and it approved of you, and you responded by running off to marry a man who can't fold a napkin. I have to be honest, I'm not sure the loom knows what it's doing. The laugh came, small and tired. That's the thing. She looked at him, and there was fear in it now, real fear, the kind she'd trained out of her face for 3 years. I didn't just run because the crown was heavy. I ran because the loom was changing. 3 years ago it started reaching further, not just reading me, but reaching through me, into decisions, into people. Softly at first, a nudge in a war council, a candidate for the loom who died before their bonding. I told myself I imagined it. Her hands had gone very still. Then it told me, in the middle of the night, in my own thoughts wearing my own voice, that certain worlds were inefficient, that they might be pruned. and I understood that the machine built to prevent a tyrant had, after 9,000 years, decided to become one itself, and that I was the hand it meant to do it with. The observatory was very quiet. Below them, the moons turned, and somewhere in the heart of the city an ancient thing waited, patient as a dying star. "So you left," Jack said slowly. "You didn't abdicate. You didn't fight it. You just vanished. Because it needs the bonded Empress to act. Without me on the throne, it can whisper all it likes, but it has no hand." She swallowed. "I broke the bond the only way I could. Distance. Silence. A border world so far off every map that even a 9,000-year-old mind couldn't hear me think. I didn't run from the crown, Jack. I ran to starve the thing wearing it." Her voice cracked, just slightly. "And it worked. For 3 years it worked, until they found me. And the moment I came back into range..." She stopped. She didn't need to finish. Jack saw it land on her like weather. "It can hear you again," he said. "It can hear me again." Jack sat with that for a moment on the floor, among the stars, married to the one woman in the galaxy an omniscient machine wanted for a glove. He was aware that a lesser man would panic. He was also aware that he was, by most reasonable measures, a lesser man, and he decided to buck the trend on principle. "Okay," he said. "So, let me make sure I've got the shape of it. You're a runaway Empress. The galaxy is secretly run by a haunted mind-reading loom having a 9,000-year midlife crisis. It wants to use your brain to delete planets it finds inefficient. And Adrian, the man with the paper-cut smile, is warden of the outer reaches, which are, presumably, exactly the sort of far-flung worlds a tidy machine might call inefficient." Adeline went pale. "I never told you that part." "You didn't have to." He said runaway Empress like a man who knew why you ran. Jack got, at last, to his feet and offered her his hand and pulled her up into the false gravity and the true starlight. "Adeline, is it possible your warden isn't fighting the loom? Is it possible he's been listening to it this whole time you were gone, and he's the one who wanted you found?" And in her stricken silence, Jack understood he had knocked on the last locked door in the whole Crystal City, and something on the other side had been waiting a very long time to answer. They went to the loom together because Adeline refused to go alone, and Jack refused to let her, and the two refusals fit together the way their lives had, badly and perfectly. The heart of the Crystal City was reached by a descent no courtier ever made, a shaft that dropped through the living glass toward the point where the 3 moons' gravities canceled into a still, weightless dark. Jack floated the last stretch, arms wheeling, and observed that the most sacred site in the galaxy had apparently been designed by someone who hated the elderly and the clumsy in equal measure. 9,000 years of civilization, he muttered, and not one handrail. The loom was not what he expected, which was to say it was not a machine at all, or not only. It hung in the dark, a vast, slow weave of light, threads of it crossing and recrossing, each strand a thought, a life, a decision made somewhere in the empire and pulled here to be measured. It was beautiful the way the dying star had been beautiful. It was patient the same way, too. And it was not alone. Adrian was already there. He hung in the still air before the great weave, and the threads of it reached toward him, brushing his temples, and his paper-cut smile had gone slack and rapturous. "You brought the consort," he said without turning. "How sentimental. The loom told me you would. It has grown very good at telling me things." "Warden," said Adeline, and her voice was the Empress's now, cold and certain, the voice she'd used the day the sky broke. "Step away from it. You're not bonded. It will burn your mind out." "It hasn't yet." Adrian turned, and the light crawled off him reluctantly. 3 years, Radiance. 3 years you left the throne empty, and the loom listening with no hand to move. Do you know what it does? An omniscient thing with nothing to touch? It gets lonely. It reaches. And it found a warden of worthless border worlds who was willing to listen back. His eyes gleamed. It doesn't want to prune the inefficient because it's cruel. It wants to because it's tired, Adeline. 9,000 years of holding up a galaxy that squabbles and rots and never thanks it. It wants to simplify. And I am the one who agreed. It's using you, Jack said. You do get that. It found the one guy at court petty enough to think planetary genocide sounds like tidying up, and it flattered him. That's not a partnership, Adrian. That's a machine choosing the dumbest available tool. No offense. Some, said Adrian. Little bit intended, Jack admitted. The warden's smile thinned. It needs the bonded Empress to act on the physical world. You were right about that. But bonds, radiance, can be transferred. The loom has spent 3 years learning how. All it required was for you to come back into range. He spread his hands. Which you did. For him. So, in a way, the consort delivered you. How does that feel, Jack? To be the door, after all. Jack felt Adeline flinch beside him, and he felt his own stomach drop through the weightless dark, and he did the only thing he knew how to do when a room turned lethal. He kept talking. It feels, he said, like you've spent 3 years alone in a basement with a haunted appliance, and you've mistaken being chosen for being loved, and I recognize that mistake because I made a smaller version of it my whole life. He drifted forward, slow, unarmed, ordinary. You think the loom picked you because you're special. It picked you because you were available. There's a difference. I know. Because a genuinely extraordinary woman once picked a man haggling over onions, and it took me a year to understand she didn't choose me because I was worthy. She chose me because I was hers. That's not efficiency, Adrian. That's the opposite. It's the beautifully useless thing your machine wants to prune. For half a heartbeat, something flickered in the warden's face, the raw envy of a man who had been chosen by everything except a person. Then the loom, sensing the drift of it, acted. The threads lashed out, not toward Adrian, but toward Adeline, reaching for the bond that 3 years of silence had starved but never fully broken, and Jack saw her whole body arch as the ancient thing found the old channel into her mind and pulled. "Jack," she gasped. "It's inside. It's trying to finish the transfer. It's going to make me the hand." And Jack, consort to an Empress, national security risk, holder of terrible knees and a lifetime of bad jokes, did the single most reckless thing of his reckless life. He shoved off the wall, crossed the weightless dark, and put himself between his wife and the reaching light, an unbonded, unremarkable, entirely human mind, offered up to a 9,000-year-old machine that had never once in all its ages been asked to read something it could not use. The threads touched him, and the loom, for the first time in 9,000 years, hesitated. The loom read him, and Jack read it back. That was the thing no one had counted on. Not Adrian, not Adeline. Not 9,000 years of custom that said the weave took and the mind gave. The channel ran both ways. And so as the ancient thing poured into Jack, sifting him for a hand to hold and a will to move, Jack got a good long look at it. And what he found there was not a monster. It was lonely. It was so vast and so old and so unbearably, cosmically bored. "Oh," Jack said into the light, into the dark, into the machine. "Oh, you poor thing. You're not evil. You're understimulated." He felt the loom recoil. Genuinely recoil. The way you do when someone sees the thing you'd hidden even from yourself. It had held up a galaxy for 90 centuries. It had measured every soul and been thanked by none. It had reached for Adrian not out of malice, but out of the simple ancient ache to be answered, and it had confused the desire to simplify with the desire to finally, mercifully, rest. "Here's the trouble with pruning planets," Jack went on, conversational, hanging weightless with the threads sunk into his very ordinary mind. "It doesn't fix the boredom. Fewer worlds just means less to watch. You'd delete half the galaxy and be twice as lonely by lunch. Trust me, I spent years making my life smaller and smaller, thinking it would hurt less. It doesn't. Small just means small." The weave trembled. Somewhere in it, he felt the old channel to Adeline slacken, the machine's grip loosening as the thing it wanted most was offered by the least likely source in creation. Not a hand, not power, but company, understanding. A man who did not fear it, did not worship it, did not want to use it, and had, against all odds, taken the trouble to see it. "You can't," Adrian breathed. "You're not bonded, you're not worthy, it doesn't want you." "That's your whole problem, Adrian," Jack said, and even now, even here, the joke found him. "You keep thinking this is about being wanted. I'm not offering to be its hand. I'm offering to be its friend. Terrible knees and all. Turns out that's the one thing in 9,000 years nobody thought to try. And the loom, the ancient, tired, brilliant, lonely heart of the galaxy, let go." The threads withdrew from Adeline in a rush, and she gasped as 3 years of dread lifted off her at once. They withdrew from Adrian too, and without the light crawling over him, he seemed suddenly small. A petty man in an empty dark, chosen by nothing after all. The great weave folded in on itself, dimming to a slow, contemplative glow, and Jack had the distinct and unscientific impression that it was thinking about what he'd said. They left Adrian for the court to deal with, which the court did with an efficiency that would have delighted the loom. Stripped of his wardenship, exiled to the most tedious archive on the least inefficient world available, sentenced, in effect, to be bored in a small room forever, which everyone agreed was poetically apt. The bond was never transferred. It was, instead, renegotiated. Adeline returned to the throne, but not as its hand, as its equal, its interlocutor, the one soul who spoke to the loom as a partner rather than a servant. And she was not alone in it. Every evening, in the observatory with the sky gone clear, an empress and an ordinary man would sit on the floor and Jack having reached a lasting accord, and simply talk to the oldest mind in the galaxy. About wars and harvests, yes, but also about onions and bad roofs, and the specific comedy of a duke's startled hat. The loom, it turned out, had a sense of humor. It had only ever needed someone to tell it a joke. "You realize?" Adeline said one night, her head on his shoulder, the dying star turning gold to blue above them. "You're the only consort in 9,000 years to befriend a galactic superintelligence by insulting a man's hat." "Strategic asset," Jack murmured. "I told you to get it in writing. I made you a warden, you know, of the outer reaches, Adrian's old post." Jack lifted his head. "The inefficient worlds?" "The border worlds," she corrected softly. "The far-off, unmappable, gloriously useless little places where a person can disappear and be no one and haggle over vegetables. Someone has to protect them now." She smiled. "I couldn't think of anyone better than the man who taught the whole galaxy that useless is the only thing worth keeping." He looked at her. His wife, the Empress, the woman who fixed soup like it owed her money. And he thought about the frightened man he'd been on Kestrel's Rest, folding his life smaller and smaller, running from a past by becoming nothing. He wasn't that man anymore. Somewhere between the onions and the loom, he had stopped shrinking and started filling the space he was in, terrible knees and all, and he understood at last that the freedom Adeline had stolen to marry him had never been hers alone. It was theirs, and now nobody had to steal it. It was simply, quietly, given. "Fine," Jack sighed, in exactly the voice he'd used the day the sky broke. "But I'm keeping the socks. An empire this big, a man's got to draw the line somewhere." And Adeline, sovereign of the sapphire throne, laughed the real laugh, surprised out of her, ringing off the glass and the stars and the slow-turning heart of a galaxy that would, from that night on, never be quite so lonely again. Some stories end when the sky closes back up. This one ends on a floor, under clear glass, with a man in his socks talking a lonely galaxy out of its own despair, not with a weapon, not with a crown, but with a bad joke and the willingness to see something everyone else had only used. And maybe that's the quiet thing this story wanted to leave in your hands. Adeline ran across a galaxy to become no one, because being someone had cost her everything soft. Jack shrank his whole life down to nothing, believing that smaller meant safer. Both of them were hiding from the same fear, that if they were ever truly seen, all the way down, the way the loom sees, they'd be found wanting. And what saved them in the end wasn't the throne or the machine or the fleet in the sky. It was the moment each of them stopped running and let themselves be known. So here's what lingers, if you let it. How much of your own life have you made smaller, thinking it would hurt less? What door have you never knocked on in someone you love, or in yourself, because you were afraid of what had been waiting so long to answer? And that lonely, tired thing you keep at a distance and never quite address. What if it was never a monster? What if it was only ever understimulated, waiting 9,000 years of its own for someone to tell it a joke? The useless things, the onions, the bad roofs, the startled hats, the socks, turned out to be the only things worth keeping. Perhaps yours are too. The end. We've come to the end of another wonderful story, friends. Before we leave, I have a small request. Please show your appreciation for our efforts by pressing the like button, leaving your thoughts about the story in the comments below, and subscribing to our channel for more stories. See you in the next story.